I introduce these guys, we have someone over here who's going to tell you something. What are you going to say? Oh, housekeeping.
Yeah. So we have a couple of housekeeping announcements before we begin. One is to turn off all your cell phones or put them in silent. And we'll be taking questions through several means, including Poll Everywhere. You can text IST Startup space and a question to the number 22333. Again, that number is 22333. And also through Twitter using the hashtag IST Startup, or you could just raise your hands. You're also welcome to take photos and share in the Flixer stream on Instagram using the hashtag IST Startup. Thank you.
All right, so next we have Justin Kahn, who is a partner at Y Combinator. He was in the very first Y Combinator cohort in the summer of 2005 and has served as a part-time partner since 2011. He's a graduate of Yale University and the founder and CEO of Exact Inc. He also founded and is a president of Justin TV, where he launched Twitch TV and was incubator for Social Cam. He also founded Appetizely and Kiko Software. So he's a busy man, and in a very honorable fashion, he has agreed that turnabout is fair, and so he interviewed Tripp, gave him a little bit of a hard time, and now he's agreed to let Tripp Adler interview him.
All right.
So go for it. Thanks.
Oh, man, these are very comfortable.
Hello? Okay.
All right.
All right, so this is totally spontaneous. That last 3-on-1 interview was completely, that we had that idea about 5 minutes beforehand, and I guess I just found out 5 minutes ago I'm interviewing Justin. So I have no prepared questions, so we're just going to talk and see where this goes. But fortunately, I know Justin very well, so I think he's one of my favorite entrepreneurs and a really good friend and a man of many interests. So I'm excited to talk to him.
I'm excited to talk to you, Tripp.
Okay, so I guess so my first question is so I've spent the last 8 years doing just one company, and Justin, you've done a lot of different things. I mean, I was just trying to keep track of them, but going from Kiko to Justin.tv to Twitch to Social Cam to the Drop to Y Combinator. It's like, what's the common theme with all the things you've done?
Yeah, so I've started a lot of companies. I was in the first batch of Y Combinator with Steve, and in 2005, that was my first job out of college. And I've always tried to just do what I like to do. That's my whole philosophy of life. It's just I have lots of different interests. I'm pretty ADD. Lots of different things came up, and unlike you or Drew, being focused on one thing is something that's really hard for me. So I've always I just like to work on new stuff. And so fortunately,
one of my favorite things about you is I feel like you're just as much of an artist as much as you are an entrepreneur.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys agree with that? It's true. He's an artist, right? So So if you were not doing startups, what else would you do?
I actually want to become an artist.
Really?
That's my
That was a good guess on my part. I didn't know that.
Well, so I feel like starting companies is a really creative process. I mean, you're out there thinking of ideas. It's a lot easier for me now because people take me seriously because we created company Justin TV. Ultimately, it started off as us trying to make our own reality TV show where me and a couple friends of mine would run around and broadcast 24/7 live, like Big Brother, on the internet. And this was in 2007. It wasn't, there wasn't technology. There was no Meerkat or Periscope back then. So we had to invent all this technology to make that happen, which, luckily we were programmers, so we kind of had some idea of how to get started. And then we, just launched this show. It was like we kind of called it a startup, but it wasn't really a startup. We didn't have any plan. We had scripted 1 day's worth of content. And it was more of just a crazy idea. And I've always loved crazy ideas. That one didn't work out very well because we put the show online, and people immediately came because it was so crazy, and they said, like, you guys are really boring, get off your computer and, like, go entertain us. And we weren't very good at that, but luckily it led us to create this company that ultimately turned into a streaming platform for anyone to broadcast anything, which ultimately turned into Twitch, which became a very, it's a pretty big company, and last year we sold to Amazon. So, my philosophy is kind of more of like, I guess I'm a little bit less strategic and planned out than like thoughtful in terms of my planning process for like, how am I going to create like a really big company? Like I've always admired Drew. I'm sure he'll tell you a story next, because I feel like he had great insight, great market, worked really hard on executing a vision, and it just like, boom, like hundreds of millions of people like love it. Whereas my path to like create things that people like are always, usually start off with just some insane sounding idea that I just really want to see happen.
Yeah, so I don't want to brag here, but I actually played a big important role in the story of Justin.tv and Twitch, because I was the guy who got them evicted from their apartment, and
It was a role.
it was a pretty big role. I'll give you some credit here, and I think that caused a big a big spike in traffic, which led to everything taking off, right? Maybe. So. But yeah, no, I guess I was playing saxophone a little loudly in their room, and that got them evicted, and it was a hit on the show. But so back in those early days, I mean, it was like more entertainment.
You were like the Newman of our show.
Yes. So back in those early days, was it more entertainment, or was it more of a tech company? Like what was it?
I mean, it was really not even really like a company at all. I mean, except that. We were just trying to make something that people thought was interesting, and so there was some aspect of entertainment. Most of the entertainment was like reality entertainment in the true form, where it was like people would just reach out from the internet and fuck with us, and like call the cops on us, and like interesting consequences would happen. I mean, interesting for them, horrible for us. But that's kind of how we got our start, and why people initially tuned into the show, and then eventually it became something. We turned it into a tech company.
Okay. So you turned to a tech company, and then why didn't you keep growing Justin.tv and just focus on that? How come you guys did Social Cam and Twitch, and how did those ideas come about?
Well, it was basically for the same, when I was interviewing you, you said, like, everything's great while you're growing, and then all of a sudden, if it slows down, like, things aren't so great anymore. And, I think we went through a very similar experience to Scribd, where Justin TV as a platform grew and grew and grew, like, very quickly, and eventually we were, like, 30 million monthly users. And that kind of all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, over a period of maybe a year, our growth slowed down. There's only so much like live video people want to consume. It's mostly sports and maybe some live news. And then
but now, like, Meerkat and Periscope are taking off.
I don't think those are actually.
That's not the same thing?
No, I mean, I don't think they're taking off.
Oh, okay.
Like in the sense, I
just read it on the press. I haven't used either one, so I don't know.
Trip Adler, early adopter.
Not an early adopter.
So we were, when our traffic slowed down, we were a company of about 20 people. We were making a couple $1 million a year, but we wanted to be bigger, And so we spent time thinking about ideas that we thought could be bigger than Justin TV that had to do with video. And we came up with two of them. One, we'd seen Instagram like kind of blow up with photos, and we said there should be like a video version of Instagram. That became an app called Social Cam. And the other was my co-founder Emmett came to me and said, hey, or the other co-founders, me, Michael, and Kyle, and said, hey, gaming is the only content that I actually like on our site. There's like a very small number of people broadcasting video games, and StarCraft 2 had just come out, and he really wanted to watch the StarCraft 2 videos. And so he said we should work on the gaming video and just see what happens. And luckily, we couldn't decide which one to pursue, so we just said, let's do both. And then they kind of grew and grew and grew, and eventually we spun out Social Cam as a separate company, sold it to Autodesk, and Twitch kind of kept growing. He started talking to broadcasters, people who were broadcasting video games, asking them how he could get them to broadcast more or create more content for the site, and then just built those features that they wanted and repeated that over and over until, last month Twitch was 100 million users. So exactly the same size as Scribd. And it's a pretty big company.
Reddit also 100 million users?
Reddit's 100 million users?
Yeah, that's what.
Oh, wow.
Or
Well, geez.
a lot of big numbers.
That's a lot.
Okay, so what did you learn? So Justin.tv was kind of like a moderate success, which led to a much bigger success with Twitch. So what did you learn with Justin.tv that made Twitch so successful?
So the thing that we never did at Justin TV was talk to any users. I don't think we ever talked to a single user of Justin TV, which is not what you should do. You should talk to users. And so, we didn't really know why people wanted to use, what they liked about Justin TV, and we didn't really know what was working and what wasn't working. We just kind of built things that we thought were interesting, and then invariably, they would never be used. We'd build these random features. We built this feature called Challenges, which was amazing. It was we thought, hey, people don't know what to broadcast live, so why don't we create this Reddit-like interface for people to say what kind of content they want to see, and then they would subscribe to that, and then when someone would say, I'm going to do this thing, right, I'm going to base jump off a building or something, and then all the people who had signed up to watch that can watch it live. And we built this whole feature, and no one ever used it. I was the only person who ever successfully completed a challenge. And that was months of time, spent kind of designing and building this thing. And so we had kind of run our company without ever really knowing why people were doing what they were doing on the site, and really without investigating until Twitch and Social Cam, at which point, with Twitch, Emmett really started digging in and talking to the people who were creating video game content and asking them, how can we make this a better experience for you? Turns out they wanted a few things. They wanted to get paid, right? So we created this partner program. They wanted to have higher quality video because, when you're streaming games, you want to be able to see all the things that are going on. So video quality is really important. So there was a lot of time spent on that. It's just a few things that by talking to users, we figured out how we could make the product better for them, and then just repeated that cycle over and over until it just grew every month.
So it was just a few insights from your power users that led to Twitch, which became worth $1 billion.
Yeah.
That was the trick.
Yeah, just talk to your users, boom, $1 billion company.
Yeah, it's well, it's funny is that, and Steve was saying something pretty similar. I think we've had the same experience. I mean, it's interesting how just talking to your users can.
Well, people are
create
scared
that
to
much
do it.
value.
I was scared to talk to our users.
Yeah.
Because they might tell you something that you don't want to hear, like your shit sucks, or I don't like your product, or the idea that you have about why we're using this is completely wrong. And so I think it's also a lot of work. You have to go figure out who they are and learn about them and actually get them on the phone.
Yeah, but you're a very creative person. You're one of the most creative people I know. How do you balance your own ideas for what you want to do with what your users want to do?
Well, now I just do whatever I want to do.
Okay.
So I'm probably not the role model here.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
That
here's
sounds
a better
All right.
answer. So I created a new site recently called the Drop.Club. You guys should all go and use it. It's basically like Reddit for electronic music, so only electronic music. 'Cause, why is it only electronic music? Because that's all I want to listen to. And so I haven't talked to any of my users for the Drop, for the most part. I've kind of gone through the motions of assigning someone else to talk to users and aggregate the feedback so I can read it, right? Which is kind of a lazy way to do it, and I don't recommend that either. But the thing that I think is good is that I'm building it for myself. Basically, I just wanted a site where I could discover new EDM tracks every day, and I know what I like, so I know and I know what's working and what's not working. So one way to avoid talking to your users is just build something that people like you want.
Yeah, it's good advice. Okay, so you guys asked me this question. What are your top 3 pieces of advice for startups? I mean, after all this success you've had with many different things, what are your top 3 pieces of advice after all this?
I might only have 2.
Okay. Well, I had 2, and then I thought of a third.
Okay,
so
here's my
you have to do 3
here's
too.
my top advice. So the first one is just get started. If I hadn't when I was a senior in college, I was working on this calendar app. So Gmail came out, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And some friends of mine, Emmett, my co-founder on Justin TV, and another friend of ours started working on a calendar app that would be like the calendar version of Gmail. And it was a bad idea for a lot of reasons. One was like I never used calendars because I only had class 2 days a week, and I could remember that. So we weren't building something for ourselves. And like hundreds of other people had kind of seen Gmail and like also started working on their own calendars at the same time. But the thing was like that got us to, we started building a prototype. We were really crappy programmers. Our first version was terrible. We didn't really know what we were doing, but it led us to apply to Y Combinator and started professionally building a startup. And if I hadn't done that, I would never have like started any of the future companies. I wouldn't have learned nearly as quickly as I have learned about, programming, building web apps, getting users, all the things that go into making a business. And I think that like I can attribute everything to just like getting started building something. And like now it's even easier, right? There's so many tools now for, just one or two people to build, something that can have a huge impact, like a Yik Yak or something. Like there's, you can host everything on AWS and Heroku. There are, web services or platform as a service things for almost any component of an app. Like if you want to build something in 2005 that like, like Steve's idea for like ordering food ahead from your cell phone, there was like no, it was a pain in the ass to build cell phone apps. There was no like Twilio for like sending text messages and stuff like that. Now there's like, it's super easy to build like almost any idea. So you really have no excuse. Like I could do it like 10 years ago, like anyone can start building something now. And at YC, one thing we look for is like, when people apply, it's like, have they started working on it? Do they even have even if it's a really crappy prototype, right? Because just having that like first initial momentum is like the hardest thing to get, I think.
Yeah,
So
you learn a lot more from that experience, right? Than from
Exactly.
like thinking about it for a while, right?
Yeah. So just get started. Don't overthink things. Just start building something. That's my first advice. My second advice is you want to work with people who are much smarter than you, or like much better salespeople than you, much better programmers than you.
Your advice is strangely similar to my first two pieces of advice.
I wasn't listening to your advice.
Oh.
What was your advice? It was hiring people, right?
Well, one was hiring, and one was persistence, and two was hiring people smarter than you.
That's not the same at all.
Well, all right, keep going.
Okay, so you want to work with people, like, I mean in just the early days, right? I was very fortunate to found Justin TV with 3 co-founders who were really amazing in different ways. So Emmett was my childhood friend he was our programmer. He basically taught me everything I know about programming. Michael's a great product guy, was another friend of ours from college. And Kyle, who is now building a self-driving car, but is also an amazing engineer. And, all the things that I've worked on and built, I couldn't have done alone. Working with people who are better than you is, I don't know, it's amazing, it's inspiring, and it enables you to actually just benefit from kind of being around smart people. I'm not putting this very well. Like, I basically all of my success is due to working with people who are like more talented than I am. Like, so if it wasn't for Emmett, and his kind of product vision around the gaming, like we would never have taken Justin TV to the next level and become Twitch, right? And like my new goal in life, well, my old goal, my goal is just always to find people who are, more talented than I am and partner with them on things. I consider myself more of like a talent scout than anything.
I mean, that's what entrepreneurs are, pretty
Yeah.
much, right? I mean, yeah. Okay, what's number 3?
Third piece of advice? That's it, I've only learned 2 things in the past 10 years.
Yeah, you have. Okay. All right.
All right, what's your next question, Trip? Come on.
Okay. We'll just stop there. Those are a good piece of advice. Okay. Next question. So I think like everyone has learned from failures along the way, and I think also it's like inspiring for other entrepreneurs to hear about like low points. So what was your lowest point over the last 10 years?
I think my lowest point was, so after Twitch, we kind of had, Twitch was going, I started a new company called Exec, which was basically it turned out, I wanted to make Uber for everything. So you just like press a button and someone would show up and like do whatever you wanted. which was awesome actually when it was working. The problem was that most people aren't creative enough to think of like something they just want, right? And there was a lot of kind of logistical problems with staffing all these people when like there wasn't very consistent utilization rates. So we eventually pivoted exec into something that was exactly like HomeJoy, and you saw Adora earlier, which is just like booking cleaning online, which I think people want, but is like a really hard and terrible business to be in, because there's all these logistical things, you're employing people, there's like a lot of inconsistent work, it's really operationally intensive, because you have to like manage like hundreds of cleaners, or in her case now like thousands, I'm sure. So I was working on this company and it was just horrible because it wasn't like a good fit for what I want to do. Like I like doing creative stuff, I like working on software. And so at a certain point I was just like, oh man, why am I doing this? This is terrible. So I sold the company and now just work on whatever I want.
So what did you learn from that experience besides you just want to work whenever you want? Because
I think that like what you should do is really just find. I mean, I think founder market fit is like really important, and working on things that even if something is a great business or potentially great business or a high growth business, if it's not something that you actually enjoy doing or like want to work on, you're not going to be motivated to get up every morning and like go to work. And what I found was like that was exactly the case. I would like get up in the morning and not want to go to work, and that was like horrible because it was really the first time that it ever happened to me.
Okay, that was really good advice. That is advice number 3. So
yeah, okay.
He did get there. He learned more than 2 things in 10 years.
Thank you.
Okay, so you had this long this run doing several really successful companies, and in the last year or so you've actually switched over to the investing side, right, at Y Combinator. So I guess tell us about that. Like, what are you doing day to day? Like, how's that different from your past job? What are you learning there?
Being an investor is awesome. When I realized what your day to day is like, I thought, man, I should have done this years ago. It's basically, entrepreneurs are doing all the hard work, and you were, helping them with funding, advice, applying my operational experience to, helping them grow. But at the end of the day, and that's super high leverage for me, right? Because I get to like work with lots of different really smart entrepreneurs, and it kind of falls in my philosophy of working with people smarter than you. However, like they have to do all the hard work of like actually executing it, right? So like when VCs tell you like, oh, we're partners and we're like working for the company, it's like they're not really working for the company. They're like, they invest in the company and hopefully they're helping you. Hopefully we're helpful at YC, but it's the entrepreneur's company. The entrepreneur's doing all the work. The entrepreneur's taking all the risk. And so I love being an investor. It's amazing. But I do think that I get to apply like the things I've learned in the last 10 years making startups to helping companies. So, now as a partner at Y Combinator, my kind of actual work is like twice a year we run these batches that are 3 months long, where it's kind of like a startup boot camp. It looks very similar to the YC that we went through 10 years ago, where we have weekly dinners with guest speakers. The speakers have improved. Basically, at the end of it, we have a demo day where the startups kind of pitch in front of the best investors in Silicon Valley. And so I basically help the companies through that, 3 months, and then in the interim times, I'm recruiting and interviewing, selecting, funding startups.
Yeah, so Y Combinator has changed a lot. I mean, you guys were in the first class in 2005, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and then I did in 2006, and now it's like a completely different place. So how has Y Combinator changed over the years, and like what's gotten better, what's gotten worse?
So it's gotten a lot bigger. In the first batch there were 8 startups. Last batch there were 114. We've added a lot of partners. The fundamental structure actually has stayed the same. I think the 3-month batches. The one thing I think that is kind of changed pretty significantly outside the size is like YC now is like a much bigger brand. Well, it's actually a brand. When we started, it was like just us going to Paul's house. It's kind of like this crazy experiment, and we weren't taken seriously, as you know, by like anyone.
You guys still serve chili every dinner?
We now mix it up to various things that can be made in a crock pot.
That's good.
It's still pretty
The chili was never very good.
not great.
Weekly chili.
Um,
Yeah.
But now when we say you're a YC company and you get funded by YC, it's like this immediate credibility, right? Thanks to like all of you guys as companies, people take YC, and YC companies much more seriously now, and it's easier to raise money, it's easier to recruit people. I almost think it's like, I'm worried sometimes that it might make people too complacent, right?
Yeah, I remember back in the early days, from our batch, it was like maybe 1 or 2 companies would actually raise venture funding, and the valuations were like $1 or $2 million.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like, and now what are the valuations companies are getting out of Y Combinator?
Like on average, maybe 8 to 10 million.
Okay, that's pretty good. And there's a few outliers that are even more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what kinds of companies are doing the best right now, and which kinds of investments are you guys making the most these days?
Well, it's gotten a lot broader. I think that's one thing that's also changed. In the last batch, we had something like, we funded 20 biotech companies. We funded a rocket company, 2 nuclear power companies, self-driving car company started by one of my former co-founders. So we and then we also fund a lot of software as a service companies and consumer apps. So it's a lot of different things. I think I don't know if there's any one type of thing that we're like. All the different partners are looking to fund different types of ideas. So it's not really like we have a strong thesis about X and we want to fund companies in that field X.
Okay, my last question, and then we'll turn this to you guys, the audience. So if someone, I mean, there's a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs here. If someone wants to do Y Combinator, what's your advice about how to get in, and also, do you think people should do Y Combinator? I mentioned the answer is yes, but.
Yeah, I think they should do Y Combinator, but I'm biased. You can read about it online. You can read almost every aspect of the application and interview process. We just finished. Close our applications for this upcoming summer batch, but there's always next year, and I think that it's a really valuable experience. To me, it's what gave us our start, like even thinking that we could start a company. But from a kind of fundraising post accelerator fundraising standpoint, like there's nothing better than YC. And I think the discipline that you learn, like going through this, like trying to make something that people want to use in a very short period of time is really good for your company. Even like that philosophy is good to kind of good DNA for your company to have in the early days, and will help you kind of years afterwards. So I mean, in terms of getting in, I think really YC in that way is like any other investor. You just want to build something that people want to use, and we're afraid not to fund. Like the best way to raise money, right, or to sell your company or have a success is to have a successful business. And like the best way to get into YC is to like start building something and make something compelling. And then we want to talk to you.
All right, we have the first
Okay.
question over here. About Twitch TV, I was curious how you ended up with Amazon. From what I understand, reading articles, it looked like Google, Microsoft, there were other people that were interested in Twitch. I was just curious from your perspective why Amazon was sort of the best match.
So why is Amazon the best match for Twitch? So I no longer work at Twitch since the acquisition, so I can't really tell you how it is, like there. Emmett, my co-founder who runs the company, seems to really like it. I think it's very synergistic with. I think he likes the philosophy on like how they run things, and they leave him alone, and he kind of runs Twitch how he wants. And so in that way, it's been really good. And Twitch has continued to really thrive after being acquired. When we were purchased in September, the site was about 55 million monthly viewers. Now it's 100 as of last month. So I mean, I think it's so far it's working really well. Yeah, so my favorite Twitch stream is, I have a couple. My favorite game is Hearthstone, and yeah, I love playing Hearthstone, and I like watching it. My favorite streamers are probably, I like Crip, and I like Trump, kind of. Yeah, and I like Life Coach. I don't know if you guys know Life Coach. He's pretty dope. So, All right, how about you back there? That, yeah.
So the way you work is you do what you want to do, and I think that's a great way to work. But do you feel that that can cloud your judgment on making decisions sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't necessarily recommend that to anyone else. I think that, like, I feel like there's two sides of that coin, right? Like, I think I have, like, creative ideas and, like, generate a lot of momentum and energy around projects. At the same time, you want to have, like, the discipline to actually operate your company over time in a methodical way, which I would say I don't really have. So I work best generally when paired with someone who actually has a lot more, like, okay, now that we've, like, have this momentum on this thing that's going, how do we, like, continue it and, like, operationalize it and, you know, talk to our users over time and measure things over time and try to grow things against a metric over time, which I'm not very good at, to be honest. So I guess the meta advice would be to work with someone who, like, complements you, not just in terms of skill set, but, like, in terms of, like, the way they, you know, their attention or, like, what they think is important, you know.
Is there one thing you find yourself repeatedly saying to YC companies that you advise? That's the thing that you always have to tell everyone over and over again?
Yeah, so I mean, at YC, the advice we give is really simple, right? You want to set a metric and you want to work on it. And usually that's something like revenue, or maybe it's number of users, or number of active users. And almost everything that you can do as an early stage company that's not working on that is probably a waste of time. So, you know, like almost all partnerships or going to conferences or networking with people or doing press, all of this stuff is just usually a distraction from just talking to your users and building something that people want, like building something, seeing if they want it, and iterating through that process. Because, like, your company can, you know, you can survive a lot of things, but you have to have a product that people want to use. And, like, everything else, like all these other things that you ignore are, like, fixable later, basically. But not having something that people actually want to use and pay for is, like, not fixable. It's not something you can ignore. So what we tell YC companies, what I inevitably tell, like, every YC company is, like, just don't do that. Just go back to work on your product and, like, iterate your product.
Yeah, so we're sitting here in central Pennsylvania, and you guys are talking about Silicon Valley, and in some ways it's just so foreign, the ideas that you're expressing and the money and willingness for investors to pump money into new startups. If you were living here, what would you suggest that we do in order to start that culture and create that ecosystem that clearly exists where you guys are at? Because I can assure you there's not a company in town that has go-karts in their office, or a rock wall, or gives a rat's ass whether you want to have a nice day, right? We live in a culture where an employer says you should be happy that you have that job, right? And so I'm just curious, and I know there's lots of people, I'm an entrepreneur, I have a business in town, but there's lots of people trying to push the ball in that direction so that we have more support, and I think that's why IST Startup and the entrepreneur minor within the engineering college has branched out. But just what would you do in order to seed that, to make that happen?
So I think that, like, you know, when we started off, it was hard to raise money. Now maybe it's easy to raise a lot of money. There's a lot of money in Silicon Valley that wants to invest in startups. But when we started off, it was hard. And you know, if you had a company like Weebly, they raised a very small amount of money and just actually started making money, right? It's kind of crazy for Silicon Valley. But I think that, like, you can create a software company from anywhere because, you know, the internet, and also the fact that, like, there are good programmers everywhere, right? Like, we were just talking about this earlier. Robbie, for whatever reason, was working at GoDaddy in Arizona because it was the only tech company there, right? Where he's from. And, like, if you, like, there's probably good programmers here. I know there are. and you could probably create a company here for a lot less kind of cost than you could in Silicon Valley. And the way you run your company is like, that's your own decision. You don't have to treat people badly or like make them like say you should be happy that you have this job. You know, that's up to each entrepreneur to. Yeah, there's probably a lot of supply here, and like less, you know, in terms of programmers, and I think you probably have access to some really great talent coming out of, you know, out of the university that you can build companies around. And if you can't raise money, then just start building something that will make money. There's like, I don't know, there's infinity ways to make money on the internet. But I'm sure, like, just, you know, when we started off, when we couldn't raise money, like, I think the best thing to do is like actually try to make a sustainable company that generates revenue, right? Instead of like, don't say like, oh well, I guess I can't start a startup because like no one will fund me. Just like you know, most entrepreneurs are actually not funded by outside capital. They're bootstrapped, right? And there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. I know this is Justin's talk here, but I just
No, sure, go ahead.
just this question. I mean, I do think that if you really want to start a tech company, it does make sense to move to a place where like tech is really happening. I mean, there's a reason why all these companies are in Silicon Valley, and that's because like that's just the culture out there. And if you're out there, you'll be part of that culture, and it will like lead to you having better ideas and hiring the right people and getting the right team. And getting funding, and I think, I mean, that's true for like pretty much everything. Like, I mean, if you wanted to be a movie star, you probably should move to Hollywood, right? I mean, if you want to go into finance, you probably should move to like New York or London. I mean, there's always like a certain place to go where certain things are happening. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't start a company out here, and there's big advantages to being in a place like this. But I mean, I think if you really want to start a tech company, I mean, I'd recommend moving to like a tech hub. And I mean, if you don't want to move to Silicon Valley, I mean, you know, New York is getting better as a place to start tech companies. Boston's pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of good places to do that. And I mean, I think you know, this area is great as it is. I'm not sure you really want it to be more like San Francisco. There's a lot of downsides to San Francisco. So I think it's good to let that culture be what it is, and we'll have go-karts in our offices, and you know, you can have other cultures elsewhere that are different. I mean, but I do think if you really want to start a tech company, I would recommend like thinking about moving to a place where it's really happening, at least for a little while, to just, you know, learn about that culture and be part of the scene. All right, I guess next question. Yes.
Hi, I have a question. What should technical people like software engineers, programmers, should know about like running a business or starting a company, like the business aspect?
What should you know about starting a company if you're technical? Well, okay, so there's like many lessons, you know, that I've learned about kind of running a business that I didn't know when I was just like programming around, you know, hiring and management and you know, fundraising, stuff like that. But I mean, I think my number one advice is just the same. It's like you want to go and talk to your users and figure out what they want, and like don't just program something. I see a lot of startups at YC just like, or applications. You know, it's like two people who have this hypothesis about how people want to use something, and they're just like programming away like in a vacuum. And that is not good. You want to like shorten your, you know, the time it takes between getting feedback, like, you know, when you're building something as tight as possible. So you like make some really crappy version, go out and see if anyone wants it, get some feedback, like, you know, then iterate it, get feedback, and you want that to be like a very tight cycle. And I think that's the kind of, you know, day zero advice that I would give you.
Hi, I have a question. How do you know that your idea is not good anymore? It's like, do you need to change your ideas? Like, for example, you change from Justin TV to Twitch.
How do you know that when your idea is not good?
Yeah.
Well, Justin TV was a pretty bad idea, and it probably should have been apparent, but I think what was really, I mean, the way that you know something's not working is if people don't come back to use it, right? And we filtered through, like, you know, when we launched Justin TV, we were on the Today Show and all this other media, and people would come once and then they would like never come back because it wasn't entertaining. It wasn't like engaging. And so that was a pretty clear indicator that it was a bad idea. You know, maybe if we were more entertaining or we were actors or something, like people would have come back, and then it could have been a huge, you know, global phenomenon. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And so it was like very apparent, very early on, hey, we need to like figure something else out. So retention, I think a lot of people like, there's a lot of things that can get attention, but like if they don't have retention, it's probably not working in its current form. And I think that like Meerkat and Periscope are probably like that, to be honest.
My question is, now with Google Glass coming out, do you think that something like Justin TV will come back again because of the ease of like showing your life around and streaming it everywhere you are? And the other question is that you were, if you could explain what swatting is, when you were streaming all the time, like the SWAT attacks, what that was and like your reaction to when that happened to you.
Well, it's never fun to get swatted.
No.
That's when someone calls the cops on you, like calls in a fake police emergency report, right? So, you know, that happened to us a couple times, not great. But to answer your first question, is Google Glass, well, Google Glass was like launched a while ago, and then they've already killed it, so I don't think that's, you know, gonna bring back a renaissance of Justin TV-like shows. But I think that the larger thing is like, the ease of use wasn't the barrier, right? The barrier was the quality of content, right? So you know, other people try to make these shows. You know, our first version of our platform had all these people like live casting, walking around doing these 24/7 cameras, and people like didn't retain because it wasn't good quality content, right? So the thing wasn't about getting more people streaming. It was about figuring out how like, is this content engaging enough that people will come back and watch it? And the answer was like universally no across like all these different types of people trying to create you know, that format doesn't really work, in my opinion.
All right, so we have time for one final question. It's the question we've been asking everyone, and it's, could you share with us what you believe the next big thing or the next wave in your industry is, or will be?
I think it's going to be drones that carry people from point A to point B.
I thought you were going to say Meerkat.
No, I don't think Meerkat. No, I have no idea. It's probably Apple Watch. All right, cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Justin.
Hey, let's take a selfie here.